Hello, my friend, and welcome to the 415th episode of the Sales Podcast. I'm Wes Schaefer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. Today we have Mr. Chris Manske, West Point graduate, Houston resident, author of Survive the Next Crisis. Man, does that mean the sky is falling? I don't know. You know, the subtitle I came up with was How to Buy When There's Blood in the Street. I think you're going to like this episode. This guy is he's in the financial services world. He's helping people prepare for the inevitable. All right. I moved to Houston. I moved to Southern California from Austin in December of 2004. I have been a student of the market since 1991. When I got out of the Air Force in 97, I jumped into that world full time. I already had my Series 6 and 63 and my life insurance. I got my 7, my 65. I followed those markets ever since. And I called it a little bit early, but I called the severity correctly. We rented for 5 years, almost 6 years, bought the house that we're in on a short sale at 50% off. So great deal. And now, here we are 10, really 11 years later after the 2008 collapse. And, I mean, there's going to be another recession. How big it is, I don't know, but they come and go. So being prepared is just smart. It doesn't mean, it's like I have always carried a little umbrella, right? A little collapsible umbrella in my computer bag. I live in Southern California. It doesn't rain very much, but I have it when I travel because you never know what's going to happen. And more than once, many more times than once, it has been nice to carry an umbrella. And so am I a negative Nelly because I have an umbrella, or, am I a Boy Scout, always prepared? I think it's the latter. Okay, so getting ready for things, being able to look around, see what's happening, it's smart. I'm talking with my 21-year-old son, helping him figure out how to prepare for the next crisis. And, honestly, that's when the big money is made. If you keep your powder dry, right? If you've got cash, and even if you don't have cash, if you have access to someone else's cash, if you find people that are in a jam and can negotiate a way out for them and get a nice little brokerage fee, an arbitrage fee for making it happen, then more power to you. Okay? So that's kind of what we're going to be getting into today. But I need your help. As you probably know, I batch these interviews. I'll book several, at a time on one day. Tonight, I'm doing the intros and outros for a couple of interviews. I'm still sipping on the same glass of bourbon, which is quite nice. But my wife, she's been running, quote, errands for hours. And I have it on good authority from my kids that Old Navy had a sale. So look, I need you to buy something from me, okay? Go to the website, buy my book, would you? 79stories.info. 79stories.info. You can afford it, okay? Trust me. You'll get a signed copy of my book, and I usually throw in some little bonuses, but I'm not going to tell you what that is. But go get the book, 79stories.info. Help me pay for some of this Old Navy purchasing my wife is making, okay? And if you're looking for a CRM, take my free quiz, bestcrmforme.com. It'll do you good. It's good for you. It's good for the soul to see what you really need, okay? So now let's bring on our guest. Chris Manske, fellow Houstonian, welcome to the Sales Podcast, man. How the heck are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you being a West Point grad and all, I agreed to speak really slowly and use small words. So if I get overwhelming, you just kind of nod or tap the screen, okay? Tap the camera.
It didn't even take 5 minutes for that to come out.
Jump right in, man. So you are a financial guy. That was my first job, actually, out of the military. I got into with a company, got my Series 7 and 65. I still follow the market, so I do enjoy that space. But I want to talk about your entrepreneurial journey and how you got into your own business. But one thing for sure we're going to get into, you've come out with a book, right? Talking about the next financial crisis.
Yes. Yeah, I'm excited to chat more about it.
Very interesting. I pride myself. I was a little early on predicting the California collapse. We moved here at the end of '04, and we rented. We rented for 6 years. So I was 3 years early in predicting the crash. I'm like, I just knew, like, no way was the housing market sustainable, right? So we rent it, and so I was a little bit early. I told people, man, it's going to be a 50% correction. No, it's California real estate, man, 10% maybe. It's like everybody, they learned one phrase, right? It's a soft landing, or they learn the other. It's going to be a V-shaped recovery. I'm like, dude, you even know what that is, but don't get me started. Anyway, so should we jump into your story? Should we jump into the financial crisis? Should we kind of weave them together?
Oh, I'll let you lead. I'm happy to follow.
Very nice. So you're in Houston. After West Point, did you do like the 5 years and get out like me?
Yes, yeah, I was in a bit more than 5 years,
Okay.
just around 6 years, and then I left the service and came here to Houston. And my first job was with Merrill Lynch. So.
Cool.
I moved up the ranks. I was often recognized in the top 1% there at the firm in a variety of ways. And in 2012, I left Merrill to start my own practice and have been glad to be leading a disciplined and well-credentialed team here under my own moniker for the last 7-8 years.
So you got started in 2000. So just as the NASDAQ was collapsing, the .com bubble was hitting. So you've now worked through at least two big crashes, right?
Yes, that's right. And I mean, a few other decent market pullbacks, real estate pullback. And then, just recently there was the energy issue in 2015. So
right.
We've been able to see a few interesting movements.
Are we in a college education bubble?
College education bubble.
Or college debt, right? Talking about what, 1.6 trillion in debt in the college. I mean, how is that sustainable?
Yeah, it is not sustainable, especially when you pair that with, at the exact same time that college costs so much, the ability to get education is so inexpensive. At some point, there's going to be a real collision. I mean, right now, people are getting to hear you and I talk, and that the cost of making that real is pretty minimal. And there's no reason it couldn't also happen for colleges. Online schools, they exist. It's not as prevalent yet as a 4-year degree at a traditional campus. But that can't stay that way going forward.
Right. So how was it going out on your own? I mean, you were with them almost 12 years. I have seen it from the inside, what it's like when somebody leaves. It can be ugly at times. How did you know it was the right time to go out on your own?
Well, that is a really good question. I think the one way that anyone can know that it's time to go out on their own is when they really desire to set the culture themselves. Wall Street has a particular culture. Certainly Merrill, there's a certain Wall Street methodology there. And I wanted to create a culture that was different. And anytime that you're on a team and you want to set the tone, probably time to go off on your own and make it real.
Well, culture's one thing, but it's also nice not having to worry about the light bill, the lease, employee issues, right? I don't know. To me, like, just the culture, I don't know if that'd be enough to drive me out. I mean, that's a big leap, right? And especially in your industry, it's so highly regulated. Is your company going to fight you to leave to keep the customers? Like, how'd you know, like, you would have a soft landing?
Right. Well, I guess you never know for sure, but I'd been doing the same thing in the same town for about 12 years. People that, they trusted in me, and I worked hard to earn that trust. And I felt that, there would be enough support that, I would have that, as you said, that soft landing. But actually the way it ended up working out was where the typical move, there is about 6 out of 10 clients that follow. We ended up with about 9.4 out of 10. So I mean, it was a very successful move. And in fact, we had some consultants that approached the team saying, can you please share with us, what did you do when you left Merrill that made this so successful with the clients following you? And they didn't like the answer I gave, because there was nothing that I did different with leaving. It was the things I had been doing for the decade prior. that made it easy for them to say that the right move for them was to follow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I've been in sales since 97, but on my own since 2006. And I sell software, for small businesses. And I would talk to these technical guys, right? Like coders and developers who spent all their time supercharging the software, whereas I just spent time using it and selling it. And kind of the same question, like, what's your secret to selling so much? I'm like, what's your secret to coding so much? Like, I don't know. Do it for 10 or 20 years and you'll get kind of good at it. Right?
Practice makes
you probably
perfect.
get the same question on investing. How can I double my money in the next year? Well, legally. So what prompted you to write a book?
Well, I kept getting similar questions from clients, and it just made me curious. The questions I'm talking about are, what happens if kind of questions. There's worries out there about the next crisis. So much so that it's very rare for me to bump into someone who, when I tell them that I'm very passionate about helping people to be ready financially for the next crisis, it's very rare that they say, oh, well, nothing bad is going to happen. Even optimists, we can accept that, there's enough tension and turmoil right now that there's something on the other side of that corner. And that's really what prompted this exercise in the publishing industry.
Well, why not just have an FAQ and just post it on your website or send them an email?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the idea of, hey, just give a quick answer. Well, you get what you pay for, right? A quick answer isn't that in-depth approach. But besides the 20 specific in-depth action items that I explore in the book, there's also another piece to it, which is that there's a predictable occurrence in the market at the onset of crisis. It's a pattern that, in my 20 years, I've never heard anyone talking about. And I was very surprised when my research team presented it to me and we dived a bit deeper into it. And I got hooked. That was the moment where I realized there is a story here beyond just an FAQ. People need to hear this.
Yeah. Well, and it's smart too. I always tell people that they'll come to me for copywriting help, and I'll tell them, well, let's start with your email sent folder. Right? Because in the heat of the moment or spur of the moment, you fired off answers that are good, and if nothing else, go grab those you send repeatedly, go send some of those more epic emails. And that's the foundation of a report. And that report can be expanded into a presentation, and that can be deepened suddenly into a book, and multi-purpose, right? Multi-purpose that content. Did you self-publish? Did you go through a publishing house? How'd you do that?
Yeah, so the book is still in the contractual phase with a traditional publisher. My agent is looking at 2 different publishing companies, and I think as they continue that discussion, we're going to end up with a very clear date for when the book will be available. But it is not the self-published route. This is a traditionally published book.
Yeah, cool. Are you going to leverage that, nationwide, or being a licensed agent, right? Sometimes you're limited by where's your license valid. So do you have bigger plans to leverage this into a national stage, or just, if people in New York buy it, that's fine, but it'll just solidify you with your, Texas clients?
Well, the book is a project that certainly has ties to my everyday professional life. The 2 are so intertwined. It's impossible for me not to see the potential for somebody in your state, California, reaching out to us and talking about money management and perhaps working together. That would be a wonderful plus to this whole process. But I think the primary goal is I'd like to sell a lot of books. The publishers that we're talking to, John Wiley, McGraw-Hill, they expect to make money on their investment. And I'm proud to be a productive part of that team.
Yeah, very cool. So what's a little nugget you can share with us, huh? What is happening? We live in, what's the old the Chinese proverb? May you live in interesting times, right? It's well, what does that mean? It could be very bad, could be very good. It's still interesting, right? It's I want to live in really good times. So what's coming?
Yeah, well, I love that proverb. The word interesting is what makes this kind of a special proverb, right? But if we use the word that we're more comfortable with to describe the moment, it's probably turmoil or tension, global turmoil. And, the book specifically talks to the differences between tension and an actual crisis. This is not a crisis. Even though there is news every day and there are headlines every day, that doesn't mean that we have a crisis every day. And one of the things that, we dive into with the book is just to help to clarify what is a crisis and what isn't. Some things can be very bad, but it doesn't mean that they are a crisis that will send the market down. So just that first understanding, that basic foundational understanding, can prepare readers for when do they need to take action and what action do they take.
Right. Well, my dad always says, if you think you're desperate, you are.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So chill out. And who was it? Was it Rothschild? Buy when there's blood in the streets, even if the blood's your own. That's the part people don't. They always leave that part out, even if it's your own.
Yeah.
Right. Because sometimes you weren't prepared. Right. You zigged when you should have zagged. Well, okay, now it's clear. How do you have the guts to pull the trigger once you realize, oh man, I made a bad move, right? How do you have the confidence to get back in that ring and double down maybe?
Well, I think there's two ways to have that confidence. I mean, one way is just through training and education. I'd like to think that my book could be a part of that training regimen. You get through the book and you've got a good, clear understanding of what is a crisis and what is not a crisis, and then how to react to that moment and what to do, what the pattern looks like. Once you've got that understanding, I mean, you become like anybody who's done a bit of training. Someone throws a fist at a boxer, that boxer's a little bit less likely to get panicked about it. And if I've taught my teenager how to deal with a flat tire, well, when the tire goes flat, she's going to be a little bit better off and back on the road faster than someone who hasn't had that preparation. So training is a big part of that confidence. The other part, I think, is a third party who is interested in helping as well. If you're an athlete, you have a coach. Many business leaders, they have a coach. There's a reason why advisors are able to do something for their clients that clients can't do themselves. And that reason is that they're separate. They can look through the window at what's going on instead of being in it. And it makes a big difference.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask. Are the decks stacked against the retail investor, right? The mom and pop, the do-it-yourselfer? It seems like it's a big, deep ocean in these financial markets, because it seems like the big money never really loses, but you hear little guys getting wiped out all the time. When should somebody try to do it themselves versus bringing in some outside advice?
That is a great question. So the question that you're asking me is, when do somebody hire an advisor as opposed to doing it themselves? And I think that if you ask 99 other advisors, you're going to get an answer that's somewhat related to the amount of money they have or the goals that they have. If they've got $1 million, if they've got $10 million, they should hire an advisor. I really disagree with that. I think that there's really only a limited number of reasons that you would hire a professional money manager, because I don't think the deck is stacked against any retail investor. I think that they can do the homework and they can manage their money directly if they wish. This is a time when transparency is becoming more and more important and more possible. I think that someone who wants to do it themselves, they can do it. But there are 4 specific times that you would hire an advisor. And number 1 is when you don't believe that you can do it yourself. Because just like you'd said that if you're desperate, if you feel desperate, you are. Well, it's the same thing here. If you feel like you can't do it yourself, well, then get a professional to help you out. There's nothing bad about that. It's smart. It's smart to do that. The second is maybe you feel like you can, but you don't want to. You hate it. This is not the way you want to spend your time. Well, good. Delegate it to a professional. The third reason is you don't have the time. Maybe you can do it yourself. You're happy to. You would like to do it yourself, but you don't have the time to do it yourself. You recognize that and you delegate it to a third party. The last of the 4 times that you would hire a financial advisor, in my mind, is if all 3 of those are true. You have the time, you have the desire, you have the know-how, but you are married to someone who does not. And you would like to be the one to help guide him or her ahead of your passing with a third party, so they know that person, you picked that person, you've got that person thinking the way you want them to think, and then if something happens to you, your family is already aligned with the professional the way you wanted them to be.
Man, don't get all gloomy on me, man. I'm gonna live forever.
I like how you think. I'm happy to just get to 100.
Yeah, and what about, I mean, it does though seem like the rich do get to play by different rules. I mean, you have your accredited investor, right? So it's like, well, if you got money, then we're going to give you access to all these other things to make a whole lot more money. Oh, you don't have money? Great. Go earn 0.1% in a savings account right now. Are those rules ever going to change?
Well, I think that those rules are half the story. I'm in the industry. I'm responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars. I know accredited investors and I see the opportunities available to them. And they are people just like the fellow down the street. I mean, the money that they have, they got it being really good at selling software. They got it being really good at medicine, or their law firm really hit a big one and they've got money. It doesn't mean that they have more knowledge than the janitor down the street when it comes to investing. So, these opportunities, there's plenty of losers in those opportunities. In fact, anytime you open up the paper and you hear about some, New York hedge fund manager that just did a trade and made tons and tons of money, what's also true is there is someone on the other side of that trade, someone that lost money.
Right.
So I think that this idea of the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, there's probably some books in the financial aisle that are worth reading to dive more into that. Maybe check out Rich Dad Poor Dad, or look at some of the things Napoleon Hill has written.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, all right, Trump gets elected and they said the markets are going to die. Then the markets don't die and they get higher, and they say, well, if he gets reelected, the markets are going to die. Or, he's going to cause World War III with North Korea, and then he doesn't cause World War. Well, now it's going to be World War III with China. And then the tariffs. I mean, should we even follow the news? I mean, it's so noisy and it seems just so negative. And what's the old adage? Economists have predicted 10 of the last 5 recessions. Right?
10 of the last 5. That's right.
Should we just educate ourselves and just stick with the fundamentals?
Well, if you're concerned about a crisis, then you cannot ignore the news. And I'm sorry that means that you'll probably see a daily drip of negativity, but hopefully with a strategy, like in one of the parts of my upcoming book where I talk about how to bring in current events into your system so that you can identify the ones that really count. If you've got a system like that, you're going to be able to take advantage of what the reaction is to those events. Now, I also think that a lot of the news, it truly is a drip. It's it's not something that is a deluge that matters. Whether it's GDP is up or the national debt is higher, or these things, for some people it's a crisis, for some people it's nothing, for other people it's wonderful, and everything in between. But what will unify folks, what really is news that matters, is when you've got a threat. A threat brings people together, temporarily brings people together, and that's the start of a real crisis where we, as readers of The Prepared Investor, can really do something meaningful to protect and grow our net worth.
Yeah, I mean, but again, can't the argument be made? The sky is always falling, right? In some market, the sky is falling. So, like, what defines a true crisis versus a pullback versus a soft landing? I mean, is a recession a crisis, or is a crisis bigger than just the typical business retraction?
Well, if the market goes down, that in and of itself is not a crisis. Everybody knows that the market can't always go up. So the fact that it went down, that's not a crisis. That's just part of the system. But there are things that they qualify as a crisis. And there are specifically 5 points here. So 3 of them are threatening in nature. So this would be acts of terrorism, something like assassination of the president, or flying planes into buildings. Though that is a type of crisis. It's a threatening crisis. That's one of the three. Another one would be a leader-driven threat. There are people on the planet that they have power and influence. And when they really exercise it, it can create a crisis. And a great example of that would be the Cuban Missile Crisis, or even the start to the Gulf War. George Bush Sr. was a very calm president, especially compared to these days. And when he did get emotional, it made a big impact on the markets when he talked about what he planned to do with the Gulf War. So, that's the second of the five, is the leader-driven threats. The third of the five is an actual act of war. We don't often think of that anymore because the U.S. hasn't actually formally declared war since World War II. We tend to use more convoluted phrases, but still, an overt act of war, of course, is going to get a reaction from the market. That is a crisis. The other two of the five, these are systemic in nature, and one of them doesn't create a big wave in the market, and that is things that we know just happen by nature. It's not a threat at all. It's just how life is. A good example would be a bridge collapsing. We know that things degrade over time, even though there is a lot of loss of life and it's a terrible tragedy. We never want it to occur. The market isn't going to suddenly drop. But on the flip side, if that bridge collapse, if it happened to have all of the necessary equipment for the New York Stock Exchange on it, well, yes, now we have a systemic crisis that directly affects the markets, and you would see a market reaction. So those are your five different crises, and each one a little different.
Can you predict something like that, though? Or is it like, well, the absence of anything big for a long amount of time, and it's like, well, statistically, it's like we're due, so get ready?
Certainly, there is the we're due, get ready mentality, and I think it's absolutely appropriate. Every day that goes by on a bull market means that a bear is closer. Every day that goes by on a bear market means that the bull is closer. The one thing that we know is going to be the same is that it won't stay the same.
Yep. So when do you know, let's say the crisis comes, the big pullback, when you know it's time to jump back in and ride that puppy back up?
Right. So the crisis pattern is a very quick one in terms of the Wall Street story. They typically get this all wrong because Wall Street typically will say the crisis has begun. You just need to hold tight. Don't make any changes. We'll get through this together, maybe years later, but we will come out on the other side. Just don't make any rash moves. And what they're missing is that people get used to the new normal very quickly, less than 90 days for sure. So you've got this dip followed by a rise. And when you are aware of that pattern and you know that that's the typical instinctual reaction of the herd to the threat, then you can protect along that curve, or you could choose to grow along that curve. If you wish to lower your risk, you could use that curve to exit within 90 days of the start of the crisis, and you can miss the time that you're worried about. I don't know if I answered your question there.
Now, are you talking in general, like an index fund, versus like I rode the precious metals bandwagon for a long time. I started buying both physical gold and silver, especially gold, and precious metals index funds in like 2001, 2002 for sure, 2001 though. And I wrote it for a long time. And, advisors were like, you're too heavily weighted. It's like, I studied it, I read it. So, but I knew the fundamentals, right? Now the market's also heavily manipulated. So you gotta try to predict some things that are, I think, maybe unpredictable, but when you talk about, because in a crisis, maybe the markets, maybe the Dow and the Nasdaq do collapse, but your precious metals indexes go way up. Maybe your transportations go up. Maybe your oil goes up, whatever. So how do you know how to balance that, which one to jump into and out of?
Well, the first thing to be aware of is that when the crisis of the magnitude I'm describing, when it happens, you really do see a full entire index drop. You might find 2 or 3 companies that don't. Usually it's related to the crisis. People are only thinking about the crisis during those buys and sells. And so, for example, going back to 9/11, every stock dropped. But, and I say every stock, I mean Dow Jones Industrial Average and S&P 500. You've got every company that is affected. But you've got some that are far more affected. The airline stocks dropped dramatically.
Yeah.
So, within that drop, you can see that people are specifically targeting something related to the crisis itself. Very similar to the Gulf War, but the other way. The oil stocks, they were up. People were making bets that, well, oil is going to go up in price. And so they're thinking only about that crisis, and that thought process, it lasts for maybe up to 90 days, and people are used to the new normal. All of that concerted effort, the instinctual reaction of the herd, it dissipates back into the individual motivations of whatever everybody's situation is.
Right. So who's doing all this selling, right? Is it all programs? We get a war, we get, a terrorist attack. Everybody just keep their powder dry. I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm just going to sell everything and sit back and watch, versus let me ride this thing out. I know the fundamentals are there. I know they're solid. I'm going to buy on the dip.
Well, who is doing the selling? And the answer is not, it's just the accredited investors, or it's just the retail investors, or it's just the robo advisors. It's just the institutions. It's not an answer like that. It's more like there's more selling than there is buying, so much more that it's driving the market down. But there are buyers and sellers all through that movement. And then it switches where there's more buyers than sellers, and we drive that market back up again to almost pre-crisis levels, sometimes past. And then we go back to we're used to this now. It's been 3 months. We're looking ahead.
Yeah, but it's at some point these computer programs do kick in, but like when I saw the 9/11, I mean, I didn't, first thing on my mind wasn't, let me go sell all my gold stocks, so who's triggering it? It's got to be the big money. It seems like that at least gets the ball rolling, and then everybody panics and everybody follows them down trying to catch the falling knife, right? And then the big guys are like, okay, that's the bottom, and they start buying back in at lows. Meanwhile, everybody else is scared to death to get back in.
When 9/11 hit, I was at my desk, and for those next 3 days, I was in constant communication with the clientele that had put their faith in me. And what I got to see looking around the office of another 50 or so advisors and their communication with clients was that people were interested in selling. They wanted to lower their risk. They were scared. They were thinking instinctually instead of I've been through this before. I'm prepared. I know what to do. And for those investors that had been through it before, they had, I think, bad information. They had the typical Wall Street dogma of, don't worry, I'm just going to sit tight. I know it's going to drop and we won't see anything big happen for a long, long time, but I can weather the storm. Those are the two messages that I heard. And more often than not, it was, we need to get out. Don't you think we should get out? And I think that, the job of a financial advisor during times of crisis and in any bear market, it goes from being one of, let's take risk, let's get your goals accomplished, to reminding people, what was the goal? We don't want to lose sight of what really is happening, because in the end, many of these crises that we're talking about, whether it's the Kent State shooting, the assassination of JFK, 9/11, the actual reach is not enough to say that, well, all of a sudden Procter & Gamble is not going to sell any more products, or Exxon's not going to be able to sell any more gas. It's just not that far reaching.
Yeah, that's what's good to have, that neutral third-party, experienced third-party to give some advice. It's why surgeons don't operate on their family members, right? They can't be detached.
It's hard to be impartial. That's right.
Yeah,
That's one
can't
of the
be
things here in
impartial.
my team is that we say we don't work with friends and family. We just don't. We offer a professional service, an impartial professional service. And what happens, of course, is over time you get to know these clients. They become friends. You really respect them, and in many cases can learn from them. But to start off, saying, to my sister, I want to be your money manager, we just don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I'll add this on the intro, but, when we publish the podcast, but, people listen to this, it's like we didn't necessarily get a lot of sales per se, but it's like we're all in sales to make money, but you got to keep your money, right? And ideally, your money makes you money. You need passive income. You need, if you make $1 today, hopefully you have $2, in a year or 5 years, rule of 72. So you need to understand why we're talking about this, because I want y'all to grow your money.
Yeah,
so
I really like that idea. I mean, the whole point of partnering up with an institutional money manager like Manske Wealth Management for somebody who's in sales is you want to get to the point where you don't have to pick up the phone, where you don't have to do that next prospecting activity. You don't have to, because you have been saving along the way. As long as your financial future is dependent on tomorrow's sales goal, well, then you're going to need to keep getting up and, hitting that annual quota. And maybe today that's very exciting and it's a part of the puzzle, but there might be a future you that you haven't met yet who's looking for a little bit less of a load.
Yeah. So when's your book coming out?
Next year. Yeah, this is going to be something that we're wanting to have out before the end of next year.
Yeah, cool. So where should we send our listeners in the meantime?
If you just Google my name, Chris Manske, last name is spelled Manske. You'll see chrismanske.com or Manske Wealth Management. Just click anywhere in there. It'll point you right to the book. And you can sign up to get an advanced copy, keep getting our updates as we get closer to publishing.
Right. So we can agree on one thing, man. All right. And it's too late for me this year, but beat Navy. Okay.
I know where Navy. This is going.
beat Navy, beat Army, but beat Navy. All right.
Beat Navy.
All right, man. Chris, thanks for coming on the show. It's been great having you.
Yeah, it's been great. I really appreciate the time.
All right, man. Have a great day.
Okay. Same to you.
What'd you think, huh? I love his advice. When you're ready to create your own culture, it's time to go out on your own. Amen. So he had some good advice in there on when to hire a money manager, how to know when and where to focus on the news and events. A recession is not a crisis. Amen. Man, so many things you need to understand about the financial markets. It's big. It's really big. It's huge. And it's the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. So dig into this, okay? Don't just turn a blind eye to what's going on in the world. Carry your little umbrella. It's okay. It's smart. It doesn't mean you're negative. It doesn't mean you're worried that the sky is falling. It just means you're prepared. Okay? So along those lines, get my book, all right? The Sales Whisperer Way. Makes a great Christmas gift. It's at 79stories.info. All right. Appreciate you doing that. And also, I haven't mentioned this in a while, but if you need a speaker for your event, hirethebestspeaker.com. I've literally been flown around the world to speak at conferences, from Slovenia to Vegas to Jacksonville, twice to Jacksonville, all kind of places in Phoenix, Southern California. So bring me out to your events. All right. It'll be custom tailored to your audience, help you meet your goals that you want to bring about from the event, and I'm happy to do it. All right, and I will work with you for a long time, preparing to make sure everybody gets the most out of it. Thanks for listening. Now go sell something. Oh yeah, Epstein didn't kill himself. Self.